I will now call the meeting to order. Would you all please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to welcome everyone this evening. Our agenda consists of the consent agenda, which is the minutes, and then the final plat for Einstein Brothers Bagels. We will then have a public hearing for the UDC text amendment, followed by site plan design review for Dunkin' Donuts, and then the site plan design review preliminary plat and final plat for Dunkin' Corner for the Walmart Market. That being said, I would entertain a motion for the consent agenda.
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The next item is the public hearing for the UDC text amendment. I will open the public hearing. I will then call for exhibits from the city attorney. We will have staff comments. We will then have application, in this case is the city. We'll hear witnesses in favor, witnesses opposed. I'll bring it back up here for discussion, and then I will close the public hearing. That being said, I am opening the public hearing. Mr. McDonald.
Madam Chair, the city has 5 exhibits. Number 1 is the staff report with attachments. Number 2 is the affidavit of publication in the Blue Springs Examiner. Number 3 is the application with attachments. Number 4 is the setback research. Number 5 is Title 4 Land Use Section, Blue Springs Code of Ordinances. Those are all of the exhibits the city would offer into the record at this time, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Mr. Allen.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. Before you this evening is a request from the city to look at modifying the setbacks, primarily and specifically the interior setbacks for accessory structures from the current 8 feet down to 4 feet. There's some background information in terms of titled exterior setback. It's Exhibit 4. It's a table showing what some of the neighboring communities throughout the metro do in terms of regulating principal structures as well as accessory structures, specifically related to those setbacks based on different zoning districts in some cases. It's a little bit difficult to read in this scale, but hopefully everyone had a chance to review this in their packets. But you can see, or maybe you can't see, but looking through the actual paper copy may be a little bit easier to read. But accessory structures range from 4 feet, 5 feet, 8 feet, 9 feet, all throughout the metro, some 10 feet in fact. Some based on the zoning district. Again, we essentially just looked at residential zoning districts, and that's really what the intent of this proposed code change is regarding, is residential zoning districts. So there have been several discussions with City Council. The most in-depth was back in their earlier this year at a City Council work session. They reviewed this issue. They also looked at it last summer in conjunction with a variance request for an applicant who is looking to construct a storage shed. Was under the 250 square foot minimum that required a building permit, but even without a building permit, the zoning code of the UDC is required to be met, and they were well below that minimum 8-foot setback, both with their rear yard setback as well as kind of the side yard setbacks. And the Board of Zoning Adjustment chose to deny that variance. And as it relates to this request, it would not relieve that homeowner of that requirement because they're still under the 4 feet that this minimum would achieve. But the intent is to look at, again, more anecdotally throughout the city, there have been a number of cases where structures such as, again, storage sheds and such are less than the 8-foot minimum, but again, did not require a building permit, so they kind of fell under the radar in that regard. This would not excuse anybody from the utility easement or other easement restrictions. So if there's a 7.5-foot utility easement, for example, 7.5 and 7.5 on either side of the property line, 15-foot wide utility easement, this would not allow them to go within that utility easement by 3.5 feet. It simply would allow that 4-foot minimum in cases where there aren't other restrictions. So that's kind of the long and the short of it. In terms of this request, again, staff is simply presenting this on behalf of the City Council and the discussion that they've had for your consideration, and I'll certainly stand for any questions.
Does anyone have questions for staff?
I do.
Mr. Trozen?
Mr. Allen, in regards to the chart that you referenced, am I to understand the ones that have hyphen then do not have any setback requirement as far as for the rear yard as well as the side yard in those communities?
They do not have a specific setback for accessory structures. So the way I read that and understand that is that the principal structure setback would apply.
Okay.
So that's somewhat similar to what we have now in that we did call out the 8-foot minimum, but that was one part of the discussion, was to simply eliminate accessory structure setbacks and let them abide by the principal structure of the underlying zoning.
Okay.
So for example, larger lot zoning like RE would be a larger setback than the 8 feet, for example. But after dialogue again with City Council through their work sessions, they wanted to make it more uniform, was their intent, and you can see that in a number of other communities. It's more uniform for accessory structures. Principal structures, you can see, varies, and that's what we have, and that's what's being proposed here.
And how does the current ordinance address like swimming pools and accessory equipment associated with those swimming pools, like pumps, filters, or a pool house? Are there any exceptions, or does that fall under this requirement?
Yes, that typically would fall under the accessory structure. Again, there's some variance in that, and like a pool deck and things like that wouldn't necessarily be an accessory structure per se. When staff currently looks at those with a plot plan for a building permit, for example, for a pool, we look essentially at that utility easement. So that's why with this proposed reduction, that utility easement still, in essence, trumps this 4-foot requirement. So if there's a 7.5-foot easement or 10-foot easement, for example, a pool would still have to be 7.5 feet or 10 feet away from the property line. It could not be in that easement.
As well as an accessory structure.
As well as an accessory structure, exactly.
So doesn't the ordinance require 7.5-foot utility easement around?
Not all lots have that, no.
Okay.
Again, sometimes it's in the rear lot only, side yard only, neither. Maybe a 10-foot easement, maybe a 5-foot, depending on the type of easement. Some we have landscape buffer easements, as you know, with some of the newer plats. So it really depends on the subdivision.
I have one final question.
Certainly.
In regards to that chart, I noticed that some of the communities have accessory structures must be 10 feet from the principal structure. Is that in relationship to the building code or fire code to provide separation between those two buildings?
That is in excess of what the building code will require, which is 5 feet.
Okay.
So that's why we did note that as something above and beyond what typical minimums are.
So the building code would dictate at least 5-foot separation between the accessory and the
Correct.
principal?
And it does depend on the type of structure, as you know, as well. If it's
Yeah.
tethered to the building and height of the building and things like that are still regulated elsewhere.
Thank you.
Other questions for staff? All right, thank you
All
very
right,
much.
thank you.
Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak in favor of this? In opposition to? Seeing none, I'll bring it back up here on the record. Any discussion? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Do we have any other items we want to discuss on this, or are we ready to hear a motion?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Trozen.
I recommend that we approve UDC 2-6-12-3486 pertaining to a code amendment, text amendment to the Unified Development Code.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Could we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Wallace,
Aye.
Commissioner Haney,
Aye.
Commissioner McCall,
Aye.
Commissioner Graham,
Aye.
Commissioner Bartolotta, Commissioner Duhan,
Aye.
Commissioner Banks,
Aye.
Commissioner Trozen,
Aye.
Chairman Culpepper.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. All right, that brings us up to the site plan design review for Dunkin' Donuts. Mr. Hawley.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the commission. Before you tonight is the site plan design review for an approximately 2,026 square foot fast food restaurant with a drive-through window, the landscaping, and the associated parking. This particular property is located on the west side of Northwest 7 Highway, north of Shaw Parkway. It's approximately 4.41 acres, and this is one of two outlots that the Point of Hope Church platted when they did their renovation to the 84 Lumber Building. So by way of a little history, the Planning Commission approved the preliminary plat for the Point of Hope Church on July 11th. At that meeting, they also approved a site plan and design review for the renovation and change of use of the existing lumber sales yard to the church and retail use. And then they also, the Planning Commission, you also, recommended approval of the final plat, which was then approved by the City Council on July 18th. I'm putting up a site plan. It's slightly different than the site plan that you have in your Planning Commission packet, and I will talk a little bit about that when we get to the stacking portion. Sure. But to start off with, the access for this particular property comes from Northwest 7 Highway. It is a mutual access for the Point of Hope Church as well as this particular outlot. The access is roughly 40 feet wide. As you can see, it allows for 2 lanes of traffic exiting onto Missouri Highway 7 and 1 lane of traffic entering into. The lot, which was Tract A configuration, as shown on the particular site plans, is not as it was approved in the final plat, so they will therefore have to do either a minor lot line adjustment or amend the final plat. In the southwest portion where the angled line comes down in the originally approved plat, that line was squared off, so that's a bit different with the site plan, from the site plan. I'm on page 4 of 10 now and talking about parking. The total required parking spaces is 10. They've provided 11. They have provided the 1 accessible space, as you can see on the site plan above. The parking spaces and stacking spaces in the drive aisle meet the minimum width requirements of the UDC. On the site plan that you have, you will notice that the stacking spaces from the drive-through on the north side of the building cross over the parking that's also located on the north side of the building. That is a violation of the UDC, and it would require a variance in order to do it. So we asked them to look at ways of reconfiguring the site, and what they have in essence done is pull the landscape area out from the back or west side of that building so that their stacking then can come around the west side, and only one space is really on the north side now, thereby protecting that parking from having stacked vehicles adjacent or behind it. The applicant has not shown on their site plan a loading space, but in fact loading spaces can be doubled for uses such as this with a parking space. When they provide their building permit plans, they will have to show us the loading space and where they intend for that to be, and we will approve it through that building permit process. Of note, and this is at the bottom of page 4 of 10 and the top of page 5 of 10, you will notice on your building elevations you will see a lot of signage. The signage is not being approved through the site plan and design review. That would require a separate alternative master sign plan application because many of the signs shown do not meet the current sign code. We will deal with that either through a separate application, or if they provide signage that meets the code, then it can be done through the standard sign permitting process. Ground-mounted and building-mounted equipment will need to be wholly screened from view of North 7 Highway. That's typical as per the section referenced in the staff report. And you also received a letter from Commissioner Billups talking about the freezers or coolers located in the rear of the building. On your elevations, and I will pull this particular elevation. We're looking at the top elevation, or the west elevation, and you can see that they have a screen wall in front of the coolers that are located on the west side or behind the building. That screen wall, the CMU matches the CMU used at the base of the building. They did not split the wall with a CMU base and then a EFS upper portion. And for a small wall like this, we leave it to you to take a look at that, but the CMU wall is probably equally desirable from staff standpoint. The trash enclosure is located in the northwest corner of the site. And the only condition that we really placed on the trash enclosure is that the CMU block noted for the trash enclosure needs to match the CMU 9 split face masonry veneer with the Jackson tan color that's noted on the building elevations, and that is simply to keep the trash enclosure consistent with the building materials that are there. It's likely that they intended to do that anyway, it just simply wasn't called out. Landscaping, as you can see, the landscaping based on the chart located on page 5 of 10 does meet the plant unit requirements and exceeds it by 39 plant units. One of the comments that we have, I'll put a landscaping plan up. One of the comments that we have is the code requires that 75% of the parking lot landscaping is required to be large deciduous trees, and they certainly have the requisite number of trees, and they even have the mix. It's just that one of the large trees may need to be shifted. We'll check that through the building permit process, but it may need to be shifted in order to count towards the parking lot landscaping. But they have an adequate number of trees along the frontage and adjacent to the parking in order to meet the 75% requirement. It's just a question of possibly shifting a tree. In addition, when they extended the landscape area to the west of the building, staff was looking at that area as a landscape area and as a potential area to add some additional trees. Again, they do meet the minimum requirements of landscaping, and so, and in fact exceed the landscape plant unit requirement. But because there is some significant area there, and because it is the rear of the building, it was thought that perhaps planting a tree or two in that landscape area would help visually with the back of that building. So staff would recommend that they look at that option. Last but not least, and this is on page 6 of 10, we want to talk a little bit about the sanitary sewer, and I think I'll let the applicant address this more than I really address it, but the sanitary sewer currently does not exist to this lot, so they will have to find that sewer. We believe that there is a sewer connection on the property that is currently owned by Quick Trip that will allow them access, but they will need to get easements in order to do that. So I think that the key issue here is that they're going to have to work with the Public Works Department to figure out how they're going to sewer this particular lot. Obviously, it's a code requirement. They'll have to do it, and they'll have to figure out how they're going to do that. And at this point, we haven't been shown details of how that will happen. Talking a little bit about the building design. The building is going to consist of primarily 4 materials: fiber cement planks, EFA split face masonry veneer, and then some storefront tempered glass. For a small building, that's a lot of materials, but they did provide you with elevations, and they are interesting elevations, a good use of those materials and a good split of those materials. There were a few items that staff looked at that we had some concerns with, and those are listed at the bottom of page 7 and 10. And the top of page 8 of 10. I won't go over each of those, but I certainly would be happy to answer questions about those if you have those questions. And then finally, the applicant will be required to screen any kind of mechanical equipment, and that will have to be shown on the building permit plans. It's a code requirement, and we will approve the screening of those mechanical equipment through the building permit process. Staff does recommend approval of the site plan and design review. We have provided 18 conditions. Excuse me, I neglected to mention that one of those conditions deals with the drive-through and the island that is located on the south side of that drive-through. Makes it the easiest to explain. Currently, they're proposing a small island that covers space number 1 and space number 2, and it's noted in the gray or the blue up on the map up there. We are suggesting that in order to give some more separation from that entrance drive and to the drive-through between the cars, that they extend that island through at least space 4. That end is not really intended to look like a cul-de-sac. It was a drawing that I had done today, and I did it relatively quickly, but really we're just talking about extending the existing island down through the 4th space, at least about halfway through that 4th space, and they could round that at the equal width that they currently have, and then just continue the shrub planting along there. That is proposed as a condition, as one of the 18 conditions. And with that, I will stand for any questions.
Questions for staff? Mr. Hawley, do we know yet why they put that peculiar angle on the lot as opposed to what they had originally planned?
We do not know.
All right.
That's something we'll leave to the applicant to explain. It's, yeah, no, we don't know why that's done on.
All right. Any other questions for staff?
Madam
Mr.
Chair,
Bottalotta?
Mr. Holly, I was just kind of curious on sheet A11 and A21, the refrigeration and walk-in coolers are different designs. Which one's it going to be?
Again, we'll leave that to the applicant to explain which design they're going to use.
No problem.
Mr. Trozen?
So in reference to the north elevation, where they have that optional exterior wall graphic, is that what you're referencing in the staff comments, that an alternative sign application would have to be submitted?
Well, now, excuse me. Well, let me just walk through it. Currently, our sign code would allow them a sign or signage that faces Highway 7, because that's the main street that's adjacent to the property. And then it allows them to have signage near their main entrance, which in this particular case happens to also be along Highway 7. So the signs that they proposed on the north side of the building and the south side of the building, the sign code really doesn't allow those signs to come or to be placed there. So they may need to do an alternative sign program if that's the sort of signage that they're looking at, and they feel as though they must have that. The super graphic that's shown on the north elevation is also something a little different, and we're not, again, if they go through the alternate sign permit process, then they can have that DD, the Dunkin' Donut logo, so to speak, on that coffee cup. If they remove that DD from it, then we really just look at it more as sort of a wall mural. And even though it does suggest that they have obviously hot coffee inside the building, that's okay, it doesn't matter. We just don't need to, if they're going to put the DD on it, then it represents a sign. Otherwise, it just represents more of a mural. They can sort that out through.
Would that be the same case to the right? If they don't have any advertisement, it's just simply a mural?
They
then
could
it
do
would
that.
be-
They could do that, yes.
Do you know if they're going to do that? Because I noticed on the plan, it's an optional exterior wall.
That's something you can talk with the applicant about.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff?
Yeah.
Mr. Wallace?
Mr. Holly, I'll go back to our famous subject we talk about lately, sidewalks. I look
Sidewalks?
here on the plot plan, I don't see a sidewalk on there. Am I missing it, or is it not required, or?
The sidewalk should have been installed with the Point of Hope Church with their final plat process.
Okay.
And as a matter of fact, it was inspected, and I think the sidewalk is it.
Okay, thank you.
All right, very good. Any other questions? All right, thank you, Mr. Hall.
Thank you.
Is the applicant present? Like to do a presentation?
Commissioners, thanks for having us. My name's Nick Turner. I'm with Davidson Architecture and Engineering, and I've worked alongside the architect on this project. And I'm available to answer any questions. We also have Mr. Sanjita, who's the owner and developer for this project. So happy for...
All right, questions for the applicant? All right, is Dunkin' Donuts purchasing this piece of property?
That is correct. We are purchasing the land and building the building on it.
And can you explain to me why that corner was cut off?
It was not our decision. It's the seller's decision to cut it off. That's how they were presenting it to us. But we are trying to work with them to have it replatted to meet the drive-through space that we need around that corner.
Okay. So when you put in that extension of the island for the drive-through, then you will have the Point of Hope Church come back and adjust. Is that what I understand?
We'll either adjust the lot, or we will have a cross easement to allow the seller to allow the tenant to have the drive-through space used up. So it could be a cross easement agreement, or it could be a redimension of the lot. So it could be one or the other.
It seems odd to cut the corner off. I couldn't quite figure out what y'all were doing. Mr. Trozen?
I was just, you had heard it, we addressed staff pertaining to that north elevation and the super graphic, as well as on the plan, it talks about the optional exterior wall graphic. So I was just wondering if that's the intent of the owner to implement those two items.
Yeah, with the super graphic, there's no issue ridding of the DD and just using that more as an art piece. That shouldn't be an issue. And as far as the mural, I think it plans to be there, but the option is there's like 3 or 4 prototypical options they can use for that mural. So the one shown isn't necessarily the one they'll choose, but it'll be the same dimensions on the wall.
So
I believe that's what's
since there are
meant.
3 or 4 options, is that something that the Plan Commission would have an opportunity to review, or is that reviewed administratively?
In order to be clear what we're talking about, because I said that the super graphic, that is the coffee cup, if it did not have the DD, would just be considered like a mural, and that is in fact the case. But when you talk about mural on this particular elevation, they have a mural. And they do have 3 or 4 options of what would be in that mural, and no, that's not something that would be reviewed by the Planning Commission. That's something that simply marking the space for a mural allows us to know if they will have that mural up there. Is that fair? Is that what you were talking about as well? I just wanted to be clear and make sure.
All right, other questions for the applicant?
Madam Chair.
Absolutely.
The same question that I asked a little earlier is on A1 and A2. What's the actual layout of the freezer roof cooler? It has 2 different ones. I'm only worried about it because north of your exit door or your employee's door, there's a little hole in there. I want to know what you're going to do with that hole, besides collect trash or whatever.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, we had this floor plan done by a different team, done by the Duncan Corporate, and the other plans that you're seeing are done by the architects over here. So it's probably that the walk-in freezer cooler design is not complete yet, but it would be behind the building. It would be enclosed with the material required, but the layout could probably change a little bit, and I'm assuming that could be done as part of the permit process to be approved. But if you have any specific concerns, if you can mention to us, we'll make sure those are addressed when we have that finalized. But my guess at this time is probably we'll go with the floor plan done by the Duncan Corporate, because that's how they is usually done. But if you feel the other layout is better than this, then we can work with the corporate to change that layout of the walk-in cooler freezer.
I guess my concern is, more than anything, is what's going to go in there if you don't square it off, number one. And number two, will that make it look like an addition to a new building instead of a contiguous building?
If we leave the floor plan as it is right now with that hole in between, we won't close it. We'll leave it as it is. And if you're okay with that, we'll probably leave it as it is. But if it is done this way, I don't think anything would be done to close that out, that hole in between. Do you see any concern with that being a hole?
Thank you.
Right, other questions for the applicant?
I just want to clarify.
Ms.
Did you
Banks?
say it was going to be closed or not?
The walk-in freezer cooler, that,
It's going to be attached to the building?
oh, that's right, yeah. If you see the layout of the floor plan, the first section is the walk-in cooler. From within that, it's connected to the walk-in freezer. So it's all attached to the building. So there is no gap in between the building and the freezer cooler, but there's a hole on to the north of it. It's just a hole, but it still connects to the building.
If you'll bear with me just a minute, I'm trying to find that on these.
See, that was straight. This was 8.
Yes,
So 3, 2, 1.
All right. Does that clarify? Is everyone clear on that? Any other questions for the applicant? All right, thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Discussion? Mr. Hawley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. One thing that I neglected to mention is that there is an existing pole sign that is located on the northeast corner of that particular site. And that pole sign is a non-conforming pole sign, and it has really lost its non-conforming status. By code, that sign should be removed. And for the applicant's information, that sign will need to be removed prior to them actually pulling their building permits. Wanted to let the commission know that that was here, and also wanted to let the applicant know that as well.
All right, thank you. Are you clear on that issue?
I wanted a quick comment on that. I wanted to mention to Jim that that pole sign has already been taken down, so it's not there anymore.
All right, great. Thank you very much. Any other discussion? I would entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve case file SPDR 6-6-12-3472 with the staff's 18 conditions.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, that brings us to the Walmart Market. We will hear item 4, 5, and 6 together, but we will vote on them separately, please. Mr. Hawley.
Thank you. Again, there are 3 items associated with this particular development. There is the site plan and design review, and the preliminary plat, and the final plat for this particular project. We'll kind of combine all 3, the preliminary and the final plat. There are a whole lot of additional comments that go with that. I believe there were 5 conditions that are being proposed with it, but that's really cleaning up a platting issue that is created because the lot is an older lot within the city, and when you come in and redevelop that lot, then you have to plat the property. So let's start with the site plan and design review. This is a request for approval of construction of a 41,179 square foot Walmart neighborhood market. The property is at 1700 Northwest 7 Highway. It is the southeast corner of 7 Highway and Duncan Road. It consists of approximately 4.26 acres in the general business zoning district. My guess is that many of you are very familiar with this site. It is just north of the CVS Pharmacy on Northwest 7 Highway. I think as we go through this staff report, I'm going to use the landscape plan only because it doesn't include some of the shading that was included in the site plan, and I think it's a little bit easier to read on the overhead projector. But as you can see, access to the subject property, or to this particular property, there is a single access that is off of Northwest 7 Highway, and then there are 2 access points located on the east side of along Duncan Road. It would be on the south side, obviously, of Duncan Road, but east of the site. The access, the one thing that was mentioned in the staff report with regard to access had to do with truck access, and it was something that staff worked with the applicant to make sure or ensure that we did not have any truck traffic stacking while it tried to maneuver on Duncan Road. and the applicant did provide us the access easement between this particular property and the CVS property that will allow truck access then to, excuse me, come around the side of CVS and behind CVS and pull forward and back in. And then as they leave the site, they've provided some paving in here so that the truck can come out onto Duncan Road and have room to turn. And that is noted in the access section. We are requiring that an approval letter from MoDOT accepting the traffic study be submitted prior to the issuance of building permits. But we have seen the traffic report, and it does not require really any, excuse me, any improvements to 7 Highway nor the signalization on 7 Highway. Parking, the parking for this particular project, they are required to have 165 spaces. They are proposing 171 parking spaces. As such, they meet the parking requirement. Loading, the off-street loading obviously is shown in the back of the building, and we just spoke a little bit about the loading, so I won't go into that much more. They do meet the setbacks required of them. There currently are no sidewalks on the property, and they will have to install 5-foot sidewalks along both Northwest 7 Highway as well as Duncan Road. As with the previous application, signage is shown in this particular site plan design review packet, but signage is not approved through site plan design review. Again, it will come through the standard sign permit process. With the landscaping, the landscape chart is provided on page 6 of 10. A brief description, I guess it starts on page 5 of 10 and proceeds to 6 of 10, and it shows that in fact they do meet the requirement for landscaping exceeding the plant unit requirement by 103.5 units. They are slightly short of open space landscaping, but in fact because they exceed the landscape requirements, the open space landscaping can be transferred from the landscape buffers to that open space. One of the big issues that was discussed with this particular application was stormwater detention. And the stormwater detention is located along both North 7 Highway and Duncan Road, and it is located within what is typically the landscape buffer zone. As many of you know, the city has a 7 Highway corridor plan. And within that corridor plan, they recommend a different treatment for the landscape buffer along 7 Highway. And that treatment involves typically undulating berms and plantings. With the detention, obviously, it's going exactly the opposite way. We're going to have more of a trench than a berm out there. However, having said that, I need to also say that the stormwater detention that they are providing does meet the code. And I'll let the applicant talk a little more about it, but I tried to blow up the drawing that they provided so you can get an idea of what that detention is. Again, along Northwest 7 Highway in particular, the trench is somewhere between 5 and 6 feet deep from the top of the hill down to the bottom. They are proposing to put a black vinyl chain link fence along the top of the wall. So the wall would be located here. The chain link fence that they're proposing would be located here. Staff has recommended that the chain link, that not be a chain link fence, but rather be either a tubular steel or a wrought iron fence that is up there because of its presence to Northwest 7 Highway. We are also proposing that they add additional landscaping at the top of the slope in order to further sort of screen that large detention basin along North 7 Highway. One of the concerns in I'm going to try for this last name. In talking with Commissioner Bartolotto, is that right? How close? Pretty close? Good, thank you. At any rate, one of the concerns really had to do with visibility of that corner, and when you put landscaping, of course, close to that corner, you really do have to be concerned with what the visibility would be coming from Duncan onto 7 Highway. Suffices to say that there is a signal, obviously, at Duncan and 7 Highway, but still it makes it difficult when you're doing a left turn movement to see the oncoming traffic going northbound on 7 Highway. We have tried to keep the landscaping away from that corner, and we do have a 35-foot visibility triangle on that corner, which we will pay attention to as we look at the building permit plans, and I assume it was done as well with this particular landscape plan. But again, we do have that 35-foot visibility triangle, but are we still recommending that it be heavily landscaped along 7 Highway and along Duncan? We are still recommending that, and again, the reason is just to somewhat screen that particular feature. Wanted to also bring up a discussion that was had earlier today with Chairperson Culpepper. And that discussion just had to do really with surrounding this detention and what it looked like. And this is a Google Earth view of a detention basin that's located on Little Blue Parkway near the Country Store restaurant. I'm not sure exactly that I've gotten the name correct, but it's right across from the church, the large church there on Little Blue Parkway. And it has very similar features in that it's a fairly deep detention basin. It undulates a little bit more than the proposed detention basin, but it was one that was mentioned as a detention basin that actually is along a pretty prominent roadway, and you don't really notice it a whole lot, and when you do notice it, it looks fairly nice. That's the sort of thing that we would be encouraging the applicant to do if they're going to do the detention basin in the fashion that they're currently proposing. To let you all know, we have talked with the applicant about alternative ways of doing stormwater detention, one of them being underground, and their response to that, and I'll certainly let them address that with you, is that that would be cost prohibitive for them to do. I'm going to have put the building elevations up on the overhead for those at home to see, as well as the Planning Commission. You have colored elevations. On page 8 of 10, the building design was described, and I'm not going to go over the entire description, but certainly staff does want to point out that the south elevation really lacks any variation in form, but it does directly abut the CVS located to the south of it, and also so there really is limited visibility, or will be limited visibility of that particular elevation. The rear of the store, the east elevation, is pretty much all one color and building material, and also a pretty nondescript elevation. With the site plan and design review, staff is recommending approval with conditions. There are 9 conditions listed with the site plan and design review. I think we've covered the key points with the site plan and design review that are noted within the preliminary and final plat. And within those two reports, there are 5 conditions that would be proposed. The Planning Commission, as you know, acts to approve the preliminary plat and provide a recommendation for the final plat. And with that, I will stand for questions.
Questions for staff? Ms. Banks?
Could you clarify for me, please, Mr. Hawley? You were talking about the trucks coming in and going around CVS to unload. What's the plan for people coming off of, going north on 7, going through the drive-up? Because it looks like, I'm not sure where the drive-up, how they're going to do that. If they're coming north. I can see if they're coming off of Duncan Road. What's their idea on what, are they going to go down through the stores or?
See, my recollection is that the drive up on this, and in this Walmart is along this elevation, so that when they come in, it's quite likely that they would be able to make that swing. But if not, they could, because there is a access agreement, they could come around and go this way. And then when they were exiting, they would exit in this direction, and they would exit out this driveway. Or if they chose to come this way, they could exit out this driveway onto 7 Highway.
Okay, so that'll be wide enough for them to make a U-turn to go to the pharmacy to pick up?
This driveway here, and because of the addition of the paving right here, will certainly allow them room to make that turn into that.
And if they're coming, but you're saying is, if they're coming north and not
If-
coming off Duncan, that area there is big enough for them to make a U-turn to come into the pharmacy?
No. I don't believe that you could, if what you're asking, and I'll let the applicant address this, but if what you're asking is if you're going northbound on 7 Highway and you pull into this driveway and you come this way, could you make a U-turn? Is that what you're saying?
Right.
No, I don't believe that you could.
So they would have to go down to
So they
Duncan
would have to go this way.
or come in behind the stores?
That's correct. It is one way.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Trozen?
Mr. Hawley, I guess I'm a little puzzled on the stormwater retention and the plan that they submitted, because since this is a flat roof, I assume there's roof drains on the rear of the building, as well as the sides, so I'm a little unsure of how that water moves in order to get out to the 2 front basins. And my follow-up question, will these be wet basins? Will there always be water in these basins?
I'm going to let Cesar address both of those questions.
Dry basin. They will only have water during the storms,
Uh-huh.
and then there will be a time where, a few hours, or depends on the storm, the water will go out and discharge into the storm sewers to the north. So they will be dry.
To the north and to the west?
Well, there is one on the west side and one on the north. I
Right.
think the flow goes from the west to the pipe goes north, and that's the way they will discharge.
Okay. And so the existing stormwater system on both 7 as well as on Duncan can handle the new building as well as the existing parking lot?
Yes, the study we received shows that's the case.
And then how does the water from behind the buildings, to the east, with this being a flat roof, and the water accumulating on that flat roof and to the roof drains, how does that water get to those 2 front basins through the parking lot?
Well, I think they gave us some, I probably will let the engineer address that, but they gave us some topo and contours that indicate that they will be going to culverts that will eventually take it to the detention. Yeah. There is some slope to the parking lot.
So they're actually going to construct culverts?
Well,
under-
I think they're probably already there on the existing parking lot, But I'd rather let the engineer explain how that's going to happen.
Okay.
Are there questions for staff? All right, thank you, Mr. Hawley.
Thank you.
Would the applicant like to do a presentation? Mr. Graham, can you see that?
Madam Chairwoman, members of the commission, my name is Mark Bryant. I'm an attorney with White Goss. We have the pleasure of serving as land use counsel to Walmart in connection with this application. With us tonight are Bill Boydson of BRR Architecture and Elliott Reed of Cochran Engineering. Together, we'd like to first thank you for your service on the Plan Commission. Walmart has 5,000 stores in the United States, another 5,000 stores across the world. We've been through numerous Planning Commission meetings, and we know better than anyone else the time and energy it takes for you to review these applications, and we appreciate it. And in behalf of the corporation, we want to say thank you. We'd also like to take this opportunity to thank you and your staff, because we've had an opportunity to work with Mr. Allen, with Mr. Holly, with Mr. Yanis. We've had numerous meetings. They have always handled this matter in a professional manner, and we appreciate that as well. We are here tonight to tell you that we agree with the conditions that have been imposed. With respect to the detention basins, we called your staff this morning to tell you that we agree to erect a wrought iron fence along the berm, that we've agreed to install the additional landscaping that your staff is recommending to you. With respect to the culverts, I'd like to give Elliott Reed an opportunity to answer that question for you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Elliott Reed with Cochran Engineering, 530A East Independence, Union, Missouri. To say the least, the detention was challenging on this project. The staff requested that we look at the existing basin, which is about a third of the size that it needs to be. So given the constraints on the site, we looked at many options. The first option we looked at in order to get the proper amount of volume was having a retaining wall around the entire basin, which we didn't want to do for several reasons. One, aesthetics. Two, cost. Three, we didn't want to have a retaining wall all the way along the right-of-way either. It just looked like a big hole in the front of the site there. So what we came up with is a rather creative solution. We have two different levels of detention basin. The detention basin on the north side is what I'm going to call the lower detention basin. It will receive the water from the building. There's going to be a storm sewer line along the back of the building, stretching up to the north and dumping into that, and the elevations work out fine. Actually, CVS's basin routes through the middle of the Walmart parking lot and will still drain into the northern or the lower basin. The new Walmart parking lot will take its water and actually direct it into the upper basin, which is on the west side of the property. And there'll be a small berm there that will separate the two, and that's how we were able to work out our volumes with only having a retaining wall on one side there. It will be, both basins will be dry, and they'll have a concrete swale in the bottom. So that we do that on all our dry detention basins, and it helps with maintenance. You always have a low flow storm that likes to erode out the bottom even if you put sod in it, and this basin will be sodded. So, and the basin itself will be maintained weekly, just like the grasses. It'll be mowed every week. So it'll look like just another part of the grass. As far as the wall itself, it's approximately 6 foot on both the west side and the north side. We had originally proposed a 4 foot tall black vinyl coated chain link fence, which is typical we do that on a lot of projects. Staff had some concerns with the way that looked along Highway 7, And we don't have any problem doing a wrought iron-like fence, something that would look just like wrought iron, black, obviously 4 foot tall. And then the wall itself will probably be, well, it will be like a Versalock modular block, a brown color to match the building. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you have on the basin there, if we want to tackle that one first.
Mr. Catalon?
Madam Chair, Mr. Reed, my concern is about it is that wall's 6 foot tall.
Yes.
I don't care what size fence you put on one side.
Sure.
What's going to stop the kids from coming around and falling off the wall?
The distance between the back of the curb and the wall itself is about 3 feet, which will be mulched. It'll have a guide rail on one side, and the fence will be right next to it. Preventing kids from climbing on it, nothing. I mean, honestly, if kids wanted to get around, I guess, the corner where it starts at 0 and works its way up to 6 feet, they could sure climb on the top of the wall there. I mean, there's not a whole lot that we can do about that.
When you drive down 7 Highway going to the north, and you look at what Mr. Holly said, when you're looking to the right, with that fence there, because how close the pickets are going to probably be if you do them to an ocean standard, which is what 6-inch fear can't go through the two, so you'll probably be 4 inches on center.
Correct.
Okay, and I'm worried about that thing going to be virtually a dark hole that you can't see across, so you can't see the oncoming traffic going westbound on Duncan Road, in case somebody decides to run a stoplight. I mean, usually, most people, I think, are defensive drivers, and how are you going to see it? I guess that's another issue that I have with the fence. And I can't see getting rid of the fence to put more landscaping, because then you got another worse safe condition. Okay, but I guess my whole thing is there's no way to go underground with some of that detention, because what's there right now is probably the prettiest corner out of the 4 corners you have, and you're going to be tearing up 12-inch diameter trees and larger to put this detention pond in.
Correct.
There's no way you could just do underground for a little bit of it and let that be secondary.
Well, the problem with underground detention is even if you do a little bit of, besides the cost, which I know nobody likes to talk about costs, you have to have so much piping underneath the ground for even a little bit that we wouldn't be able to get rid of the retaining wall without tearing up 1/5 of the parking lot to install pipes all through it. And then you'd still have, and that's just to get rid of the walls, so you'd have enough room to slope it. So at the end of the day, you still have 3-to-1 slopes coming on both sides there. Then as far as the fence, with respect to site visibility, it's approximately 50 feet off the road, which will be right next to the parking lot there. So I don't know how much that will affect cars coming down Duncan to be able to see on 7, especially given that intersection is signalized.
Were you able to work up the cost for underground storage? I heard staff say that you had commented to them that it was cost prohibitive. I was just looking for a comparison between what you're proposing.
As a general rule, it's 8 to 10 times what above ground detention would be. So shooting from the hip, it's probably $150,000, $200,000 item on this project.
It just seems we've had other newer commercial developments occur that's been very successful as far as having that underground.
If you have and that's true, if you have a lot smaller site, that's more common, like just using Dunkin' Donuts as an example, rather than 40,000 square foot grocery with a 2.5 acre parking lot, then it's really, we don't do that usually.
If we get a major storm, that exceeds the 100-year storm, what kind of will the basins be able to retain that water? And what kind of a release into the stormwater? I mean, how long will it take to reduce that water so there's no surge into the stormwater system that could cause other problems within the city?
The basin's designed for a 100-year storm, and it still has another foot of freeboard on top of that, so it's above a 100-year storm.
Okay.
As far as the release rates, that's all per code, and I would say, just going from memory in the report, the water's only going to remain in the basin for 10 to 12 hours, and that's on a 100-year storm. So the normal storm would only be not even an hour, and then it'll be back to dry condition.
Okay.
And all of the stormwater now, and it will after the development, There's a 20, I think it's a 24-inch pipe underneath Duncan Road, and that will all feed into that same pipe. So we won't do any work underneath Duncan, or to Duncan.
Other questions for the applicant? So we've explored all the other options for this detention.
I couldn't tell you how many layouts I've done before we ended up at this one. And we thought this
I
one-
mean, obviously, that is the main concern here.
Sure, and believe me, I understand that. It's going to be a similar look to CVS, and the thing that we have going for us aesthetically is that it's all below the pavement, so the wall's not going to be at eye level. Highway 7 and the parking lot are the same elevation, so it'll be looking right across it. And I can promise you that if anybody maintains their property, it's Walmart. And I can assure you that'll be mowed every week with the remaining grass.
So one more question.
Yes, Mr.
Are you going to
Chairman.
resurface the existing parking lot?
It'll have all new curbs, all new pavement.
So you're gonna go in and grind the existing parking lot
I
up?
haven't worked out the details yet. We're either going to, just lift the old asphalt off and repave, or reclaim, which would be milling it and leave it in place.
So, I mean, you have that opportunity. If you lift off the existing asphalt, it's going to be exposed to put underground and run the pipes, right?
We could do that, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we're gonna tear up the parking lot, and also the 3 entrances will be reconstructed. It'll be concrete again like it is now, but they'll just be new.
So that definitely wouldn't be a cost factor if you're already going to tear up the parking lot and have it exposed to run the tubing as well as, or the pipes as well as put in the underground storage, right?
Yes, besides the pipe itself, there's also a large amount of granular material that has to go around
Right.
the pipes for the underground storage. But yes, I mean, we are tearing up the parking lot to have it resurface, yes.
All right, thank you.
The parking lot's exceeded its asphalt life
Sure,
expectancy.
yeah.
So, just to restate this, if I may, what I hear you saying, Mr. Trozen, that if the parking lot is going to be dug up to be repaired, redone, we already have the beginning of the underground detention taken care of, correct?
Just to clarify, I mean, we're talking about 3 inches of asphalt. That's all we're going to be removing there, not digging 6
Okay.
feet for underground storage. Are you tearing up the parking lot? Yes. Is it a small percentage of cost lifting off 3 inches of asphalt as opposed to the entire underground system? Yes, that's a big difference in cost. But
Okay. Right.
And Madam Chairwoman,
Yes,
we'd
sir.
like to be perfectly clear. This store, Walmart has asked us to complete this store on an expedited basis. And your mayor, your staff have all been very helpful. And we've brought this matter before you in a very fast time. The store, however, has been under consideration for more than a year and was put on the back burner. We're afraid that if we require underground detention, this cost is very likely to cause Walmart to make a different decision about this store location. And so it is not a small item. To Walmart, it is a big item and a big expense, and we hope that you will weigh that in your decision-making.
Well, in response, let me just say that this commission will make the best decision that it can with the evidence that you have brought before us and that staff has presented. We do not look at things and say, well, we want to save somebody a couple of dollars. We have to make our decisions based on the best practices, and I do appreciate your information and your comments.
Thank you.
I have a question for Mr.
Mr.
Bryant.
Trozen.
Mr. Bryant, how long has Walmart owned this property?
I don't know offhand. My recollection is 2 to 3 years. It also, if my recollection serves me correctly, we also own another parcel of property in Blue Springs, and both have been under consideration for a considerable length of time.
Well, I would just want to go on the record that I'm very excited about the concept, the store, very excited about having that Walmart supermarket there. But as Ms. Culpepper, the chairperson, had talked, we only get one opportunity to take a look at this. And I'm sure, you know, stormwater retention is a big issue. And the visibility of a basin, especially at these corners, is something that we need to take under consideration as well. So I just want to say that I'm very excited about your project and everything. We're just trying to make it the best site also aesthetically for the city of Blue Springs too.
And Walmart's not, is not at all jaded. The company has heard the concern expressed by your staff, and it immediately went to ameliorate the problem and agreed to the wrought iron fence and agreed to the additional landscaping. What we've not been able to agree to is the inordinate cost that underground detention is going to require. And it's only because of that inordinate cost that we have not agreed to.
All right, any other, yes, Ms. Nicole?
Madam Chair, I do have a question for Mr. Reed. You said Walmart was going to maintain this once a week. Who's going to maintain like the trash in the parking lot when it rains, you know, really hard? Where's that?
The maintenance of the store is handled store by store basis, so that'll be the store manager. Who gets assigned or all that, I can't answer.
Okay.
I do know they contract out all their lawn maintenance.
Okay.
As far as cleaning the parking lot, I'm assuming that'd be associates.
With the trash and then it rains hard, you know, where that trash is going.
Sure.
Yeah, okay.
Mr. Wallace?
Yes, I have a question. There used to be a store there, I believe at one time, was there not? And it was torn down. What kind of water retention did they have on that existing store, do you know?
Whatever's there today, just on that north side. That's been there, I believe, since they developed that store.
Okay.
That's been a day or two.
It's been.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Bottolano?
Mr. Reed, I want to change the question just a little bit.
Okay.
And I guess what I'm worried about is the left-hand turn when you come out of the parking lot on Duncan. Okay? I don't know if it's a staff question or if it's your question. Has anybody studied that street very good to see what, and I don't know what traffic you're bringing, other than I would think that you're probably going to bring 30,000 vehicles a month to that corner?
It's 4,200 trips in and out each day.
4,200? Well, it's a little more than the 35,000 probably, but long story short, sometimes if you go to 6th Street, which is the next intersection to the east of that, I spend 2 and 3 minutes getting across the street now. So if you're that close to the intersection, how are you going to take a left-hand turn on to Duncan going westbound?
And that was looked at in the traffic report, and I'm sorry, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but the stacking along Duncan at peak hours was taken into account, and the delay was acceptable coming out of the site there.
Okay. On the next driveway to the east with the concrete, the stamped concrete, is that only there so your trucks, when they take a left-hand turn, don't tear up all the landscaping?
That's correct. That is correct. It's I guess, long story short, it's a long drag for the trailer to come directly out of the truck dock. And when they make that left, when the trailer drags around there, it's going to have to hit that concrete. That's the only reason. If we had a longer throat before the street, I wouldn't need that.
Any other questions for the applicant? All right, thank you very much, sir.
Thanks.
Any discussion? Ms.
I
Banks?
guess it's hard for me to envision a big wrought iron fence up there on Duncan and 7 Highway, and how that's going to look. Because it is pretty. And so I'm just have a concern with what that's going to look like. I'm not pleased that we're going to lose a pretty intersection.
Other comments?
Well, Madam Chair,
Mr. Trozen?
in regards to the site plan, and I'll just restate that I'm very excited that Walmart is looking at constructing a market on that corner. But I believe that, you know, as a commission, and at least as a commissioner, I think we definitely need to look at the stormwater detention basins that are being proposed. And I think with other developments, new commercial developments that are occurring in Blue Springs, the use of underground detention basins have been successful. And so I would like to see us, as far as making a recommendation to the City Council, is to look at proposing the underground stormwater basin.
Any comments?
I have a question. Across the street where Walgreens sits, I mean, they don't have a 6-foot fence there, but there is some landscaping and things there on that corner that could sometimes be a little difficult to see. And I'm trying to envision pulling out of Walgreens onto Duncan, because I've done it several times. And I can't really think of a time where I've gotten frustrated because the wait was so long. I mean, you have to watch, you have to be careful. But I think we need to weigh the use of that's before us on that property and what that would do, you know, for the neighborhoods around there, as well as whether or not that underground system, you know, it really would warrant the possibility of losing that.
Mr. Graham?
Question for staff. What makes the basins they're proposing any different than other basins that I see on site? Is it just the depth? I guess I'm struggling with why when other properties around town have the same basins along highway frontage and has not been an issue.
The basins that you will find along highway frontages typically are older basins. They haven't occurred since we've done, for instance, the Highway 7 corridor plan. For the most part, when we have larger sites like this site, we try to see that those basins are not visible, that they are usually located to the back of the site. It just happens that the grading of this particular site really doesn't allow them to to direct the water to the backside. And frankly, we have residential behind this particular site, so that also acts as somewhat of a restraint, even if they were to completely regrade the site in order to direct stormwater to the back of the site. So again, it limited their options as to how they handle stormwater.
Madam Chair, may I say something, please?
Yes, Mr. McDonald.
The stormwater detention is a requirement of platting. So the question is whether or not they've met the requirements for stormwater, not whether we like it or not.
So what's the purpose of doing a site plan review if we don't like the location of the basins as a part of the site plan review?
Well, I don't know that the site plan review necessarily covers where the basins are located.
Or how they look?
Well, if they look, well, let me just tell you that it's a process that is in the platting. If they have met the code, we don't have the authority to make them do underground.
Madam Chair, I have one more question.
Yes, Ms. Yuhan.
As far as the fence itself goes, I've heard a lot of talk about the upkeep of the landscaping and the mowing and that type of thing. What about the upkeep on the fence? Because I would not want to see a black wrought iron fence go in there in a couple of years. It's looking rusty and not very pretty.
If we were to do a wrought iron type fence, what I would propose would be an aluminum fence. It's black powder coated.
Okay.
It won't rust. I mean, that's a true no maintenance fence. It's 1 by 1 inch aluminum, 4 inch on center. And you can make the top whatever design you want. There's many different designs. When you get into the wrought iron itself, that can rust, and it does require sandblasting and repainting every however many years. But the aluminum, you don't have that. The aluminum's very common on pool fencing because there's no maintenance.
Any other discussion?
So, Madam Chair.
Ms. McCall?
My concern is by not putting it underground, how many years from now when Walmart leaves, who's going to maintain that, and then what's going to happen to it? So that's just kind of my concern when we don't go. I mean, how long is Walmart going to stay? And then when they leave, then who's responsible for maintaining that area? So that's just my concern.
Okay. Any other discussion? I would entertain a motion. Let's look first at item number 4, the site plan design review.
Madam Chair,
Mr.
I would
Graham.
move to approve SP, make sure I'm looking at the right one, SPDR-6-12-3481 with the 9 staff conditions.
I have a motion
Second.
and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No. No.
Could we do roll call, please?
Commissioner Haney,
No.
Commissioner McCall,
Yeah.
Commissioner Graham,
Aye.
Commissioner Bartolotta,
No.
Commissioner Duhan,
Yes.
Commissioner Banks,
Yes.
Commissioner Trozen,
No.
Commissioner Wallace,
No.
Chairman Culpepper.
Aye. That passes 7. No, that can't be right. That's not right. I've got 3 nays on this side, I know.
5-4 in favor. 5 aye, 4 nay.
Thank you.
I have, as far as a no, I have Commissioner Wallace and Commissioner Bartolotta.
And Commissioner Haney and Commissioner Trozen.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Let's do another roll call vote, can we do that?
Certainly, certainly.
Okay. All right, one more time here. All right. Commissioner Wallace,
No.
Commissioner Haney,
No.
Commissioner McCall,
Aye.
Commissioner Graham,
Aye.
Commissioner Bartolotta,
No.
Commissioner Duhan,
Aye.
Commissioner Banks,
Aye.
Commissioner Trozen,
No.
Chairman Culpepper.
Aye.
That's right.
Okay, correct. All right, that brings us to item number 5, the preliminary plat. I would entertain a motion. Okay, folks.
Madam Chairwoman,
Mr. Graham.
I would move to accept, I'm getting in the right spot here, the preliminary plat PP-6-12-3483 with staff conditions. I don't recall the number, though,
5.
with the 5 staff conditions.
I second.
I have a motion and a second. Let's do a roll call vote, please.
All right. Commissioner Haney,
No.
Commissioner McCall,
Aye.
Commissioner Graham,
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace,
No.
Commissioner Bartolotta,
No.
Commissioner Duhan,
Aye.
Commissioner Banks,
Aye.
Commissioner Trozen,
No.
Chairman Culpepper.
Aye. 5 to 4.
Yes.
All right, that brings us to the final plat, and I would entertain a motion. Mr. Graham,
Would you like me to
you're
do
on
that
the
one
roll.
as well? I would move to approve the final plat for Duncan Corner, PF-6-12-3489 with staff comments. Again, I don't recall the number.
5.
With 5 staff comments.
I have a motion
A second.
and a second. Could we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Bartolotta,
No.
Commissioner Duhan,
Aye.
Commissioner Banks,
Aye.
Commissioner Trozen,
No.
Commissioner Wallace,
No.
Commissioner Haney,
No.
Commissioner McCall,
Aye.
Commissioner Graham,
Aye.
Chairman Culpepper.
Aye. 5 to 4. 5 to 4. All right. I know that was a very difficult item, and I appreciate everyone looking into that so clearly. That brings us to election of officers. You have on your agenda the current officers, and we have one change. The alternate this past year for the Downtown Review Board was Mr. Trozen.
I don't want to take it away from Mr. Graham, but
More than welcome to have it.
All right.
Could you go? Yeah, the last one, I was there with you.
And I went ahead and I verified that, just for everyone's information, the Board of Adjustments meets normally once a month. Historic Preservation normally meets once a month. And the Solid Waste Management Commission normally meets once a month. The others are often on an as-needed basis. However, that could change.
Madam Chair,
Nothing's cast in stone.
to further specify that, the ones that do meet once a month are almost always on a Wednesday. For those,
Thank you.
For those that are considering their schedules, I guess.
All right, so let's just start from the top. Chairman, nominations for chairman?
I nominate, Madam Chair,
Mr. Trozen?
I nominate Susan Culpepper.
I really appreciate that, however, according to the bylaws, I cannot take another consecutive term. Thank you very much, though. I appreciate that vote of confidence.
Madam Chair, I'd like to recommend or nominate Ken Billups Jr. for chairman.
Second.
Okay, any other nominations?
He beat me to it.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Excellent. And we'll just let him know while he was not here.
That will show him to be missing, Commission.
Okay, that brings us to vice chairman.
Madam Chairman,
Mr. Wallace.
I would like to nominate Susan Culpepper for Vice Chairman.
Okay, I have a nomination.
Second.
You're enjoying that, aren't you? Okay, any other nominations? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? Brings us to the Board of Adjustment. Mr. Graham has been doing that this past year.
We haven't met much, so. If no one else wants to do it, I would be willing to continue to serve.
Nominate Mr. Graham.
Now watch, I get a
He just
meeting every month.
3 weeks.
Yeah.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Now, we'll need an alternate in case Mr. Graham is unable to participate in any given meeting. Right now, Ms. Duhon is taking care of
Although I
that.
had to go once. If nobody wants to, I'll go again. It's not
Okay.
very long.
I would take a nomination.
I make a motion that Ginger Duhan be the alternate to the Board of Adjustment.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Historical preservation, I know that Mr. Billups has been doing this. I do know that he enjoys doing it. I spoke with him prior, actually via email, to make sure I wasn't putting his name on something he wasn't going to be happy about. But he is willing to serve again on that.
Well, Madam Chair, I'll just nominate Ken Billups for Historic Preservation Representative.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Technical Review Committee Representative. Right now, we have no one in that position.
What is it?
What does that
Yeah.
position entail?
Yeah, explain.
And they don't, but they only meet as needed.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry, do you want to know what the committee does?
Yeah, would you describe them, please? Or we could
They
just
la-
make it a surprise.
They last met in 2004. They. Was that?
Mr. Trozen just volunteered.
Okay. So every 10 years, maybe. No, you'll be coming due here soon. hear appeals essentially to, for example, plating decisions, other subdivision requirement decisions, and also the building code decisions, so the building official decisions, or also zoning decisions that I may make as director. So, is that right? Administrative appeal? No? It meant
Mr.
so
McDonald.
long ago, I got it wrong. Okay, I'll defer to the city attorney.
The only thing they've done while, during the time I've been city attorney is review maybe building things where wires or something's been damaged by fire. I got a defective microphone here. They mainly just review situations where the building code people have said that a building is a dangerous building, and they make a determination whether it is or it isn't, and then what to do about it. They do have some things about, as Mr. Allen said, as far as making determinations about the code and things like that. But most of the administrative review of an administrative decision by Mr. Allen or myself or Cesar or anybody would be by the Board of Adjustment.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the clarification.
I would like to nominate Mr. Bartolotta. I believe his background, as far as in building and construction and development, would be an asset to that committee.
I agree. I think that's a great.
Second.
I already did that.
It's okay?
Okay.
So all in favor?
By the way, we are meeting next week.
Okay, very good.
Madam Chair, if I may, just for your information, some of the folks who are on there, it's just a 5-person committee. So the Planning Commissioner representative is one of those, and the other 3, for example, are Don Klapmeyer, Bob Frost, and Cal Jones. So it is more of a building-oriented committee.
All right. Next is the Development Advisory Commission. I will tell you that I have been on that. I enjoy it, so unless someone else is interested, I would certainly be interested in continuing.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion for Susan Culpepper to continue as Development Advisory Commission representative.
Second.
Okay, is anyone else interested in that?
I already made a motion. Too bad.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Solid Waste Management Commission, I sent an email to Mr. Abbott. I did not get a response. However, he has served on it for quite some time. It is in his field of expertise. So I think that it would be good to keep him on there. Mr. Trozen?
I would recommend that George Abbott be appointed to the Solid Waste Management Commission.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you. Downtown Review Board. Ms. Banks, you have been on that.
Well, Commissioner Trozen and I, we were just talking, we could just swap positions and let him have experience. I love it, but, I know that you got to give it up once in a while. Let somebody else give it a shot. So I'd be willing to do that.
Make a motion.
I'll make a motion that Commissioner Trozen be the Downtown Review Board representative.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, and Mr. Trozen, would you like to nominate Ms. Banks?
I would like to nominate Lynn Banks to be the alternate to the Downtown Review Board.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Very good. I know we do that a little odd, but I think it's important on some of these commissions that we do have that consistency. I would anticipate that next year, those of you who have just joined us recently will be willing to jump in and get more involved in some of these other committees. But I know you're new, and we've just hit you in the last couple of weeks as new commissioners. So we'll let you take a couple of months to get acclimated, and we hope that you'll jump in next year as we go forward. The other thing I wanted to do is I want to recognize Sarah Wilbur. Sarah, you want to wave? Sarah is our new planning technician, so we welcome you. Glad to have you. All right, any other business? Mr. Allen, have you got anything else?
No, just to welcome Sarah, obviously, so thank you for doing that. What's that? Oh, yes, she's a Kansas State graduate, just graduated some 2 months ago. So we have 2 K-State alums working in the community development office. So things are going well so far. A full 3 weeks? Is that 3 weeks already? So, and we do have another Sarah who started today as our planning intern for the remainder of the summer to help us get jump start on the comprehensive plan review. So Sarah will be working with Sarah.
Very
on that,
good.
so.
Very good. All right, any other business to be brought before the commission? I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you, folks.
Too bad.